Good morning and welcome to Real Human Design Stories, where we share real-life stories of how human design has helped our guests know themselves on a deep, transformative level. Whether you're joining us live during Sunday Story Hour in my Facebook group or catching this on your favorite podcast platform on Mondays, you'll be able to find all the details you need in the show notes or the Facebook comments. Human design helps us to differentiate between what is ours and what is conditioning. By knowing and trusting ourselves, we develop deeper, more honest relationships and unlock our true gifts. My guest today is Aypril Porter. I'm Kathy Bashanko, and I'm having all kinds of glitches with my throat and my words today. Hi, Aypril. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good, except for my scratchy throat. Aypril is a 5-2 emotional projector, left angle cross of masks 2. And she is going to tell us all about how she found human design, or it found her. I honestly don't even think I've heard your story. Aypril is in several communities that I'm a part of, and we always talk about human design stuff, but that's what I love about this podcast, and is the conversations of the more personal things so how did you find human design, Aypril?
Human design found me. I wasn't looking for it. I actually was working in nutrition, but my office was in a sensory deprivation float center. And so these group emails would go out. And one week there was this email that said that this person was coming in to do readings. And I said, human design? What the heck is this? I'm like, because I'm in nutrition and I'm thinking, are we genetically modifying people now? What the heck is going on? I was like, I don't understand.
The first person I've heard that's thought it had something to do with that kind of thing. Go on.
Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what this is. So I have to go research it, right? Because I'm a 5-2, but I have a lot of first line energy in my chart. So I go to Google and I'm like, what is human design? And I pull it up and there's this calculator and I'm like, okay, I will put my information in, and because I'm also a personality typing junkie where I do all the tests and all the quizzes.
Right.
I always have been. And like way back when we had magazines and we'd take the assessments in the magazine and circle all the A's and whatever and tally those up. So
I'm old enough to remember the Cosmo quizzes.
Exactly.
Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. So I enter my information and it says I'm a projector. And I'm like, okay, great. What's that? Right. So then that leads me further down this kind of rabbit hole of what is a projector? And of course, because we all want to be the rarest thing, I think, I'm like, but I'm not a reflector, like the rarest type. Then I read more about that and I'm like, okay, this projector thing, this kind of is interesting. And wait, I have to wait for an invitation. I was like, no, I don't wait for invitations. This isn't how it works. We're supposed to make life happen, right? And so I kind of entered this dance of this is interesting information. And then I'd pull back and go, no, this doesn't work for me. And so I probably spent a good 2 years, in this dance of I'm drawn to it. And then I'm pushing it away because I think my whole life I was taught, make things happen. And because of conditioning, I've become fiercely independent. And it was I have to make things happen on my own. And so it took me a long time to learn that there's value in the invitation. And then from there, it just kind of slowly integrated into my practice, into my family, into my life. And it's kind of grown from there.
And how long ago was that?
That was 2015.
Oh, okay. So almost 9 years probably.
Yeah.
So at what point did you decide to write a book? Because for those who don't know, Aypril has written a really, really much needed book about parenting the child you have, right? Is that what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when did you first decide to do that?
I don't know that I decided. Initially, it was kind of we were still in kind of this pandemic era. It was 2021, and we had some friends who had babies. And one of them, we went and visited, and the parents knew a fair amount about human design. We pulled up a chart and was like, this child's a quad split, and like looking into this 8-centered manifesting generator chart. It was like really interesting. And so I said, why don't I put together some keynotes for you and I'll send it to you later. So I went home and I started writing, and I realized like, I have like 3,000 words here and I haven't even scratched the surface of what I want to tell you. And so I kept writing, and then I kept writing, and it was like these words just kept doubling and doubling. And within like a week, I had 13,000 words on this page. And I was like, I think I might be writing a book. Like, I don't know what this is, but it just kept coming. And the whole book kind of downloaded in about 5 weeks. It was a fascinating experience.
You feel like it came through you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow. And so I posted in the group last night a little bit about, just a picture of the book and said, this is who I'm talking to. And I don't know if you've had a chance to see the post, but there's been some comments about how people have read the book and how much they really liked it. And I did share a review I saw on Goodreads where someone was just like gushing about how much it had helped them. So, if you are a parent or considering being a parent or, know a parent, it's probably a great resource to get. I have not read it yet. I have a daughter who would probably wish that I had had it when she was a child. I have a splenic manifestor with a defined will. And, if I'd known what I know now, I would have been a much, we all do the best we can, right? So not in any way trying to make anybody feel bad when they don't have those tools, but it sure would have been a lot easier for her and me if I'd known I was a projector and if I'd known she was a manifestor, right? That would have like changed everything. So I'm wondering though, so you were working in this wellness industry. Mm-hmm. And are you still in that industry, or now are you more specifically in the human design industry?
Well, I've kind of evolved a lot of times.
Right.
I still kind of have a hand in the nutrition stuff, but it's like lightly there. I also trained to be a death doula last year. So I do grief and life coaching and human design, and I do family readings. I kind of incorporate it all.
Kind of a jack of all trades, huh? Right. You're a natural though, right? You're a second line. So you've got all these natural gifts. So what do you think? Have you ever contemplated what the common thread is in all those things for you?
I think it's just, that's interesting. I think there's this thread of like helping people see a different possibility. I think that with all of these, with human design and parenting, we get stuck in these patterns of, well, my parents did it this way, or society says we have to do it this way. And we go against our own knowing. We feel it in our bodies. We know like something isn't quite right, but I don't know what else to do. So I do what I've been told or taught. And we realize at some point it doesn't work. And so we either change directions and do something different, or if we're lucky, human design enters our life and gives us a different blueprint to help us understand our child. And I think the same can be said of like grief and death work. We have these ideas of how things are supposed to be. But what if we break all the rules? What if we let people do it the way that they want to do it? What if they don't have to have a funeral? What if they want to have a living funeral? There's so many possibilities. Why do we have to do things one particular way?
Yeah, that's really beautiful. So now this whole studying as a death doula after writing a book on parenting by design, I'm wondering if you feel like you've kind of gotten niched into a place from this book that you wrote, because clearly it's been very well received. Are people like, wait, no, I don't want you doing this? Or
I honestly think that my audience, who's been with me for 10, 11 years, has watched me evolve so many times. People will drop off, of course, but nobody says, hey, you don't do this anymore, really, or you can't change and do something else. They just are kind of along for the ride, it seems. which is kind of fascinating because I expected people to kind of push back and say, no, we don't want you to do that. We want you to do this other thing. And it's just kind of evolved. I think people are kind of sitting back with popcorn like, okay, what's she doing now?
Yeah. So as a fifth line, though, I know a lot of fifth lines who like worry a lot about that projection of like, oh, people are going to expect this of me, or they're going to want this. And I'm wondering how you've acclimated to that whole thing, because you seem like you are pretty good with, you can think what you want. I'm going to do me.
I think that fifth line controlled my life for a long time. I had a situation in high school where I was bullied by friends, and there was a lot of projection, and I was very hurt. I didn't understand it. And friendships that had fallen apart over the years, and that projection, the accusations and things that I left kind of going, what did I do? Like, am I a horrible person? What went wrong here? And it's interesting because, the technology that we have now, we have Facebook, and a lot of these friendships were through Facebook messages, and I could go back and look at that. And I actually had my husband look at it at one point. I was like, how does this read to you? Because at this point, I didn't really know about the fifth line. And I was like, am I losing my mind? Like, I don't remember this the way that this person is saying things went down or happened. And when human design kind of entered my world and I learned about the fifth line, I was like, oh, okay. I see that because the people had their own things they were working through and with. And those are the very things that were being projected at me. Mm-hmm. And I think for a long time, it did keep me hidden. It kept me scared to put my face out there, scared to speak up, scared to publicly say something. And I mean, I was always a shy child, though, and I don't know if that has to do with this 5-2 profile or conditioning. I've kind of wondered that off and on. But I think there's a point where you just realize, like, people are going to think what they're going to think, and you have to do what's right for you.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a huge step. How far into your human design journey do you think it took for you to get to that place?
Probably a good 5 or 6 years.
Yeah. I think that when people enter into their human design experiment, Ra talked about how it takes 7 years for the cells of the body to regenerate. And we know the science of that isn't really accurate anyway, because some of them, yes, some of them never, some of them 100, whatever. But it takes a long time for our nervous system to regulate in a different way, and for us to keep looping around an issue and fine tuning it, right? And that fifth line, second line, double projection field, is very rare. And so I have a sister with that 5-2, and I know of quite a few, but it's very different than like the 5-1, right? Mm-hmm. What's your husband's?
My husband's a 5-1, and one of my daughters is a 5-1. My mom's a 3-5, and my other daughter's a 1-3, and we all live together. So and I have, 4 projectors and a manifester in this house. So there's a lot of projection happening here.
Who's the manifester?
My husband.
Ah, okay. Wow. So not a lot of sacral energy there, huh?
None. There's some when we come together, right, but sure. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. So in some ways that makes you a very unique family, because you don't have that one person who is like driving everybody else's energy and kind of in some ways often making everybody else feel inferior in their energy, right? So. Yeah.
Although I have to say that my husband was raised by manifesting generators and generators. So there's a lot of conditioning that he has experienced around being productive and doing and always being busy. And it's taken years of me saying, can't you just slow down? Can't you just take a rest? Can't you just take a break and just do maybe nothing today? Like nothing productive. And he's finally getting to that point where he's recognizing, but he still fights it. So that energy of the conditioning in a manifester can sometimes be a lot for me and others to feel, because it's still that doing energy.
Yeah. Let's get something started. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Now, my dad was born in a rural area where we don't have any idea what time he was born. And he's been gone since 1995. But he was either a manifester or a manifesting generator. And I often try to understand, but it's so hard to tell whether he was just a manifester conditioned by my manifesting generator mother, or whether he was a manifesting generator. But I can see that that strong, get up. What are you going to do? Sleep your life awake energy in him and that sort of thing. So writing, I'm going to shift back to the book a little bit. So I've been toying with this whole thing, and I really want this to be what you want it to be, because there's a part of me that's like, I know people are going to really want to talk about this book, but I also know you're doing a lot of other things. So if there's other things you want to gear into, I don't want to make this be all about your book. But I'm wondering how that experience was for you as a 5-2 specifically. You wrote this book about parenting, and then was there this feeling of like, okay, I'm the human design parenting expert. Now people are going to expect me to be this perfect kind of mom? Or did you have any of those kind of self projections or projections on you from other people?
No, I don't think anybody has projected that onto me, and not at least that I know of. Maybe they have, and I haven't heard it, but I think that the message of the book is really, we do the best we can with what we have. And when we learn better, we do better. And here's some tools to help you, and try it and see what works for you and your family. I'm not here to be your expert. I'm here to give you the tools and information and have you go into your life, because you know your family, you know your children, and you know what's possible, and experiment and play with that.
What was the hardest part about writing that?
The book?
Yeah.
Editing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you read your words 1,000 times and you're like, am I even seeing words anymore? What is happening?
I just realized I have to go back and edit the heading of this video, because somehow I have the word projector, which I write in my sleep all the time with like an extra EC or something, because I realized I'd copied it from exactly what I was reading at the beginning. And I was like, oh, okay, so we're going to have to fix that. So yeah, it's funny how we can know things back and forth. But what about the, as you were going through and writing about the specifics, was there anything that you felt like, oh, I've got to investigate this a little bit more and figure out, was there something that, like a particular part that felt like, you said it all flowed. Was there one part that you're like, oh, this isn't really flowing, I'm going to have to work at this or sit with this, or am I projecting on you?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, like, I've tried to write other things and I've hit dead ends, I've hit walls, and it just hasn't flowed. This just flowed, and I've never experienced anything quite like it. So it felt like there was a portal that opened, and this is when it all came in, and I was here for it. I was taking that invitation and I was writing. I was just letting it come out, and I didn't edit it at first. I just wrote. But I could feel as we were going through the editing process. And let's see, I started writing this in March, I think, and it published the next January, like at the very beginning of January. So it was a fast process. Mm-hmm. But I could feel as we were going through editing that portal opening, is the best way I can describe it, was closing. So it was like I felt this pressure to edit it while this was still open. This energy was open and available, because after that, it felt like there was a shift.
It'd be interesting to have looked at, or maybe you did look at the transits of that time period. Was there something that was there for you that you would feel like planetary wise might have shifted, and, a long-term planet, or have you looked at that?
I haven't looked at the long-term planets, and I don't remember the exact time when it felt the shift. I just noticed it. But I have run a chart for when I started writing this, that day that I came home and like sat down and was like, started writing. And it was manifestor energy that was present that day. So it was very fascinating.
Oh, that's awesome. Like a very much initiating energy. So what did you learn while you wrote this book?
I learned a lot about myself as I wrote this book.
That's usually what happens when we do something different.
I learned to surrender more.
You have the channel of surrender, right? The 2644?
I do.
Me too.
But yeah, there was a lot of having to surrender because I'd never written a book before. I didn't know anything that was really involved in it. And there's a deep surrendering that has to happen in the whole process. And there was I think that there are times where people will write a book and they have a very specific vision for it, and every detail has to be a certain way. And there were elements of it that were that way for me. But like putting it out into the world, it was kind of like, this is it. You like it or you don't like it. If I sell one book, I feel like I've won. I feel like it was worth it. So that's kind of how I just let it be. And then it's kind of just had a life of its own.
That feels like such beautiful projector energy. I'm really personally realizing how much anything I do has to be for me, right? Like if somebody listens to this podcast and gets something out of it, that's great. But I'm doing it because I wanted to talk to you, and this is interesting to me, and hopefully the same. And the more that I lean into those sorts of things, I realize the more people actually want to hear it too, because it's authentic. And I think that's just such beautiful energy when we really trust that what we really want to do and enjoy doing is what we should be doing. And that's kind of what I'm hearing you say was the process of writing this book. But it's been well received, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's so fun and fascinating to see the life that it has of its own. I feel like it's its own entity. It's just out there living its life. And people from all over the world will send me messages about the book and how it's impacted them. And I love those. I cherish them so much. They're so beautiful. And I love to see that it's helping people shift their perspective and open their parenting style to another possibility.
So is it, I don't want you to share anything that's too personal that has been shared with you, but is there anything you feel you could share that someone has, you're not giving names or whatever. So, or that you feel like sharing?
I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know that I could remember the specifics of it right now. I feel like it's just this overall sense of gratitude, and on both sides, from the people who are sharing and my gratitude in response to that.
I love the name.
Sorry. I was just going to say, I hear from a lot of parents of manifestors, actually. That's a common theme.
My daughter still talks about how she felt when she learned to read, and she used to walk by my bookshelf and she used to see the books I had, because I had Parenting the Strong-Willed Child and something about getting, just all these books that basically implied that she was horrible when she would read the titles. They would say things like, when you're, I don't like, I've thrown them out. I've thrown them all away. So I can't, the names are even gone. I just remember that specific one. And so the idea of parenting the child we have is so much more empowering for, because there's this idea out there that if you're, what kind of parent did they have? Every time a kid, goes and does a horrible thing, they're like, well, what were his parents like? Like somehow, if we had parented them the way they would have parented them, then this child wouldn't do what it is. And I understand the sentiment behind it. It's also how, as parents, we make ourselves feel safe, and we think my child could never do something horrible because I have been a good parent. It gives us a sense of control. But this way that we think we're supposed to shape and mold kids into what we want them to be instead of, rooting them and watering them and tending to their growth, in a way that allows them to become what they want to be. And I'm hoping that that's really what more and more people are moving towards with this move for conscious parenting. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I have had, there's a few people watching who are saying, that they are really excited to hear you talk more about this. So I'm wondering if there's anything when you have spoke about the book that you like. Are there certain anecdotes or any kind of stories you might want to share of things that people, just any kind of stories that come up for you about the book?
That people have shared with me?
Or that you feel, I'm not sure. I haven't read the book, and I apologize for that. My daughter's 23, and so by the time it came out, I was in a different genre. So I keep it's on my list of books to read for business purposes. But I'm just curious. What are there stories in the book, or how? Like, what's the structure like?
So it's more like, I think what's different about the book is that I have listed out the types, the energy types. And then there's a section that's like, if your child is this type, here's the information for that. If you are parenting as this type, if you are parenting a child as this other type. So it's kind of pulling it apart and giving people the tools without having to learn all of human design to really understand it. So I hope that comes across, and I hope that is what people see in it. And it sounds like from the feedback I've had that is true. But, it's interesting you said that your child is grown and so you would be reading it for business purposes. But what it's really fascinating to me is the amount of people who have read it for themselves to reparent, and the amount of people who use it with their adult children.
Yeah. Oh, that's good to know. Yeah, I definitely know that we are always parents, and we're parenting not only our adult children, but our inner child, right? Exactly. I was just thinking about that today. I saw some old pictures of me when I was like 4 or 5, and I thought about how, as a projector child with this huge family, I was amplifying so much energy, and how my exuberance was often squashed, right? I was often told to go there if I was going to be loud and rambunctious, and whatever. And I see pictures of me like laughing and being silly, and I think, oh, what happened to her? And so that resonates. But I do think that the whole idea, there's this thing in traditional human design where I hear a lot of people talking about, well, I'm a projector, and so we're not supposed to have children. Right?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So getting rid of a lot of those narratives in our heads, like obviously it's difficult for anyone to raise children, right? That whole process. And if you don't know how to use your energy as an undefined sacral, that can add a layer of complications. But I'm wondering, as a projector mom as well, if you look like you had something to say when
No, I was just thinking about that. And I was thinking about all the projector parents that are in the world, and how we have to do things differently. And if we're parenting a generator or a manifesting generator, there can be a lot of energy that we're taking in. And I think it's just so important that we look at our design and our child's design and look at how do we meet both of these needs. Because I have projector children, but I have one mental projector and one emotional projector, and they're very different. They need very different things. But if I just looked at them as projectors, I might assume certain characteristics.
Yeah.
And if I look at my design, I have 7 centers defined. I'm conditioning them with a lot of me, And so I have to consider that. I can't just say that we're all projectors, so we should all operate the same and we should all do the same things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think of people like, I can't remember her name, but the Kardashians' mom. She's a projector. She had like 6 kids. I know she probably had a lot of help, but you know, I think that's the thing, is that we have this message too. And maybe it's just the people that I have spent time with and myself. We have this idea put in our minds that, like, if we're going to do things differently, we have to do it ourselves. If we are going to move away from our family, we'll have to do it ourselves. There's just this message of like asking for help is a weakness, and it's not.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really been something. It's interesting because I feel that as well. And you and I both have a defined will. We both have that 2644. But it's only recently that I have, I've got the crystal on my face again from my window. But it's only recently that, excuse me, throat chakra, this real knowing that it's okay to ask for help. And it doesn't mean that I can't do it. For me, I have seen there's so much of my design that is meant to be experienced in relationship. I mean, I'm a triple split. My sun gates are both hanging gates on an undefined sacral. So relationships are important, but so much of my life, I've used that defined will I can do it myself. I'll do it. I don't need you to do it. If you want it done right, do it yourself, that sort of energy.
I know that one.
Right?
Yeah. There's a lot of conditioning there. And I think that defined will in a projector can be kind of dangerous at times, because we feel like we have to just lock into that willpower and we push ourselves beyond what we really should be doing. How I ended up in burnout and having panic attacks. I felt like I had to do it all. I was a stay-at-home parent, but I had a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I was trying to do everything. And I was teaching myself to like can vegetables at the same time. I was growing this giant garden, what felt like a giant garden, and learning to can everything all by myself while my kids are running around. And like, what was that for? Like, to prove that I could? Like, why? You know? Like,
just because we can doesn't mean we should, right?
Exactly. And this was before human design came into my life. And it was interesting because my panic attacks and everything led me, and my child's health led me into nutrition, first of all. And I recovered a lot, but there was still this piece of me that was judging myself. I kept saying, okay, I've adjusted. I had to reconfigure my life in different ways. I have to do things differently. And I was, but there was still this judgment of, but you're not doing what you were doing before, because I was amplifying all of the energy and trying to do everything for too long. And so when I couldn't get back to that level of doing, there was a judgment, like, why can't I do this? If I push harder, if I take more supplements, if I eat more of the right foods, like there was this idea that I had to get back to that same level. And then when human design came in, and I was like, oh, projector. Oh, okay. And then as I learned more about the invitation and resting, I was like, I am not meant to do all of those things that I was doing. Like, getting back to that is not sustainable. Getting back to that is not where I should be. So it gave me this permission to just drop more into who I am and how I'm designed, and live in this aligned energy. And I think that that's what, as parents, if we can see that and recognize, okay, maybe I just need to ask for more help. Maybe if I can hire more help, or I can ask for friends to trade babysitting or something. Like, there's so many ways to go about it to get the rest that you need.
Yeah, I remember when my daughter was really small, there were times where I was like so thankful for those play dates, right? Because I only had one child, so she went over there. Or even if a friend came over, somebody occupied her, and it made it better. But there's this thing whenever we take on something new and we have a new thing, where we think we should be able to do the new thing and all the old things that we used to do, right? And I'm looking too, with you having that undefined root, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that just adds to that whole idea of feeling this pressure to do it all, get it all done, and adding the not knowing when enough is enough on top of that. I could see where that's a recipe for burnout. And is that how you wound up coaching for working with people on burnout? Is through your own experiences?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, in my 20s, I was a super employee. I worked as a medical assistant and I did everything and I did it quickly, right? Because that undefined root was putting pressure to do everything quickly. And I didn't know when to say, okay, this is enough. So I would just keep doing. And then I got bitter because I didn't feel recognized for all the doing. It was just expected of me. It was expected that I could do all these things while other people weren't doing them, but there was no benefit really. At some point I realized there was no benefit to me doing all of these things, and I became bitter. I wouldn't have told you then that I was bitter, but I was bitter.
And how long did you stay bitter?
I don't know. It was probably, by the time I really realized it, I think was after I had my first kid and I went back to work and I realized I only have so much energy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm giving all this energy to this job that isn't even rewarding me for it. It's not appreciating me. And I became bitter. So that probably lasted a good year.
So I want to switch gears again. And you said you recently trained as a death doula.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if you can tell us how that came about, because that's very different than the rest of your story.
I think I've always had a fascination with the things we don't talk about, death being one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Not like a morbid fascination, just like what happens after we die? What is it like when somebody dies? Like there were questions, like it was so veiled, I think, for me that as a kid, I kind of always had these questions. And like, I really loved cemeteries when I was a kid. I would love to just wander around them and read the headstones and like wonder, like, what were these people like? And wow, this one died really young, or this one died really old. Like what contributed to that? Just more about like, who are these people? And so 5 years before I was born, my mom's little sister died. She was 10. And that grief, I felt through my whole childhood. I felt that growing up. And it's like the loss was never really processed and talked about. It was this grief that was suppressed and life just went on. But we knew not to ask questions too much to my grandma because it upset her. But I remember wanting to know, like, who was this person? What was she like? What did she like? What did she like to do? So many questions. And I think that because I felt that and that deep curiosity as a child, it's just kind of followed me. And I think I want to help shift that story, like that we can talk about our grief. We have a place to talk about it, that watching someone die doesn't always have to be horrible. We can be with somebody as they die, and it can be a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. Is your grandmother still alive?
She is, but she has Alzheimer's. And so she has just really reached a point where she doesn't know anybody.
So was there ever a point where you did talk to her about the grief?
There was actually. So my daughter went through something, a little health thing when she was maybe 2, and it turned out to be nothing, but it kind of freaked me out. And it was in the same realm as what her daughter had dealt with. And so I called my grandma and I was scared. And I said, can you tell me more? And she did. And then after that, she opened up more to me and she told me some more things and let me know her a little bit. And that was like something that I will always cherish.
Yeah.
But it took, 40 years or something for her to be able to talk. And because there was a purpose, because she knew I was worried about my child, she was willing to step out of that and tell me more about her.
Yeah.
And I think the other piece is that my great grandmas died when I was 12. And I remember my grandma taking care of her, and I would spend weekends with my grandma. And she was living with my great grandmother at the time. And my grandma needed a break. She wanted to go to bingo. So she was going to leave me with my great grandmother, who had emphysema and was not well. And I remember being terrified. Like, what if she dies when I'm here alone with her? What if something happens? What do I do? Who do I call? Do I call 911? What do I tell him? Like, it was really scary for me, but I couldn't tell her that. All I could tell her was, please don't go. I don't want you to go. And she was upset with me because she needed a break and didn't want to stay. And so I think that was scary for me because I didn't have information. I didn't know what to expect or what could happen or what to do. And so I think the more we open these conversations about death and dying and grief, the more we normalize that it's just part of life.
Yeah. So through this whole training and this process, has that opened you up to conversations about death with your own children?
Oh, yeah.
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 And how old are they now?
They are 14 and 16.
Okay. And so that's teenagers and, that's,
Well,
go ahead.
I was going to say, before I actually did the training, my 14-year-old was probably 12-ish, almost 13 maybe. And she had to do this assignment for school. She came home and she's like, I'm going to be a funeral director. And I was like, oh, okay. What makes you decide that? She's like, I just think it'd be nice to help people. So I'm like, okay, cool.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was a lot of death in, everybody's family, right? But I remember when I was born, I only had one living grandparent, and she had already lost her husband and 2 children before I was even born. So my mom was the only remaining sibling. And you never asked her about it. You never talked about any of those people to her. You never acknowledged that those people were even ever existed, because there was this idea that it would be rude or somehow if you don't talk about the people that they don't exist. And I think what I've learned from my own experiences with death, I was blessed enough to be present when my mother passed. I sat with her. I went through that fear. I was not 12 years old. This was only 10 years ago. So 12 years ago, my mom passed. But I was in a situation where we were bringing her home from the hospital into her independent living situation, and someone was supposed to come from the palliative care association.
Hospice.
Yeah, and it was palliative is what they called it, but it was similar to hospice. But the woman who came clearly did not understand my mom's condition and was not at all willing to be the person my mom was going to need in that moment. And so I made the decision that I would stay, and we would send her home until they could get the right person there the next day. And I remember that panic feeling of literally sleeping next to my mother's bed on the floor, because what if, right? And, but it turned into weeks, that before she actually passed, but, and being there with her in many lucid moments and many after my mom had years of dementia. So times where she could talk and say things that she hadn't been able to talk about. But so there was this really beautiful experience in that some people just get weird when you even hint that being with your mother when they died was a beautiful experience. No, of course it was sad, but I think the people that I know who have lost loved ones get to a point where they really need to talk about the person. Right. So I love that you're doing this. And I'm wondering if you feel like there might ever be a book in this for you.
That's funny you ask, because yes, I think there is. I have been working on one off and on over the last, 9 months or so as it shows up. And you're the second person in probably 2 weeks to ask me that.
And how is human design going to?
It's part of it. Yeah. Human design is in everything I do.
Right.
Like, it is the one thread of consistency through everything. Like, okay, so there's the death duel, and there's the parenting, and there's the nutrition and all this stuff, and the life coaching and the grief coaching. But through it all, human design is like the backbone of it all. It's everything.
Yeah.
Because there's so much truth in it. There's so much understanding and peace that can be found in it. Like, I've done readings for people whose loved ones have passed, and there's the conflict of like, I don't feel like I really knew who they were, or I didn't make peace with this part of them, and I was always mad at them for this, or they were always upset with me for this. And when we can look at those charts, there's a lot of healing that can happen when we just show somebody the energy of who somebody was.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited to see what comes through you on this one, because I feel like it will come through you. It'll, like the other one did. It's, that stream of consciousness kind of writing is often where the most magical stuff happens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we do have few people listening, quite a few actually. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions. We still have enough time that you could pop it in the chat. If anybody has anything you'd like to ask Aypril, we can definitely look at that. But so what are you doing now, Aypril? Well, we wait because there's a delay on comments and people have to type.
What am I doing now? A little bit of it all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. If you look at my website, you'll see that there are family readings on there. There's coaching on there. There's grief coaching. There's death doula work. So I kind of see what shows up.
What excites you the most when it does?
What excites me the most is when somebody is here for it, when they're ready to get into it and see what we uncover and be open to the possibilities, no matter what it is, no matter the subject.
Yeah. When people are really ready to transform something, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how I'm at too. Like, wherever you're at, when you're ready to open up to something more. So,
yeah. And I think, well, you have the second line too, but I think that something that's really coming to my awareness with the second line is how much it's important. Like, I've forced myself to post on social media and stuff. Like, I set up the schedules, but I don't feel it. I don't feel it like I do it. Sometimes it feels like aligned and I post something that's random, and that's the stuff that gets attention. The other stuff is just like, I feel like I'm supposed to be doing this. I feel like I have to have a presence, but the energy behind that is so different and the response is so different. And so I have learned, and I have had this experiment going this year where I've put a post up every day just to see what would happen that I pre-scheduled. But like, the posts that I just randomly throw up there, those are the things that get attention. I wonder for you if it's kind of similar to that, like the things that you feel like you have to do or you're supposed to do for business are different than when you're like, yes.
That's really interesting, because this year, my word for the year is trust. And so I'm really resisting those I have to do this kind of posts. And what I've noticed is sometimes in the past, I've wanted to say something and put something out there, but there's a part of me, I'm also outer visions, and visuals are very important, that thinks in order to put something out there, I need to go and make it beautiful in some whatever way. And now I've started doing this thing occasionally where I'll just, put something like, I love on Facebook, they have those little boxes where they have like, there's one with like flowers and your little avatar or whatever, or they're just like pretty little things, right? And I'll just put a statement in one of those boxes, and I get more comments on that than when I create some sort of totally curated post or something a lot of times, because it's just in the moment, the energy is still there. And usually when I'm in the energy of feeling a certain way, I shouldn't say usually, but a lot of times it's because of some sort of cosmic energy then in the moment, in the transits. And oftentimes we're all kind of feeling it based on, the same thing. So if I say, what the heck, those are the things that engage people. And really trusting as a second line that when we're doing things just naturally, and honestly, for anyone, probably, but really for second lines, I think that when we try to do anything that's not natural and not just what we enjoy.
Yeah.
And
Well, I think that the invitation is really interesting too. There was a project that I was really lit up about earlier this year, and the person I was going to do this project with got busy, and I was like, that's okay. I released her from it. She was busy. She was good. We had a conversation, and then I said, I have somebody else who I think might be interested. And I reached out to them, and they were like, yes. But then I could feel, we hadn't talked for like 2 or 3 weeks, and I could feel that the energy had shifted. And I was like, this invitation is no longer valid. It's no longer available for either one of us right now. And so we had a conversation, and we were both like, yep, not now. It's not the thing.
Yeah.
So, I think listening to that is really important, and we overpower it so much of the time.
Definitely. That's been a huge lesson for me, is to let go of the story that my mind makes up when the invitation, it's not the right timing, or, whether it's not even an invitation, just sometimes when I'm trying to force something instead of allowing, right?
That defined will, right?
Yeah. And really just pushing through. We're just here to surrender that, that trusting that, and as a projector with an emotional authority, but a defined spleen, you're like I am. And I'm wondering if this is, in that fact that you have that, you're like me. And I'm wondering if you are noticing more and more how important your spleen, your defined spleen actually is, even though it's not my authority. My spleen oftentimes gives me that spidey sense of, not now, or, ooh, this, or whatever. And then I just have to be like, oh, isn't that, my favorite phrase is, isn't that interesting, right? And then just kind of wait, and it becomes more and more clear. And so many times in the past, I would have used my defined will or my root, and, or some emotional energy, and pushed to make something happen. So, it's interesting. I say that a lot now. The other thing I say is everything is happening for me. So, and right now we have this transit energy that has the head gates defined, the 63 and the 64. So it's really easy to get caught up in those questions. But I found it really powerful to sit and ask the question and let it go, right? Just trust that the answers are going to come in when they're meant to come in, the right timing and that sort of thing. So I have not seen any actual questions, but I did have a comment here from Mary had said, palliative care is such a blessing. I wish people understood it and utilized it more. And then she said, I had readings done for my son who had died at 10 months old. It was so healing to get to know him in that way. And yeah, I think it, and I know Mary's story. And so, and I know that finding out some of the specifics of his purpose and his, his energy mechanics, even as that young baby, was really healing for her. So, and is there anything new you have going on right now that you want to share with people that is, that they might want to check out, or just go to your website to work with you?
I'd say my website is the best place to see what's happening.
And what is your website for people who are listening in the podcast? We'll put it in the notes and everything later, but
it's just my name, aprilporter.com.
Okay. And April is Aypril.
Correct.
For anybody who's listening on the podcast, you might not be looking at the notes. So, And I'm trying to, and the book is Parenting the Child You Have, Reimagining the Parent-Child Relationships Through the Lens of Human Design. That's awesome.
And there's a workbook too.
Oh, that's right. I did see that. Cool. So what does the workbook have in it to do?
So the workbook is so when I think of a workbook, I initially think of like, I'm going to write in this book, but I wanted to create a book that was not just going to end up in landfills. Like you use it once and then you're like, I got to hide it or like throw it away. And I wanted families to be able to use it. So it's actually just a bunch of journal prompts more than anything, getting you to connect deeper with your design and your child's design to decondition.
Yeah, cool. So, so are those both available on Kindle as well, or just?
They are. And they are available through local bookstores. You can ask them to order them. And actually, I got my book into our local library. So some of the libraries have them too.
That is a great idea too for other people. If you loved this book, see if you can get it into your local library. You never know who it's going to help, right?
Yeah. So you can request them to add a book. And I did, and it took maybe a month or two. And they actually brought more copies in than I thought they would. And so it's been interesting to watch. Yeah. Every once in a while, I'll check and be like, has anybody checked it out?
I'm going to do that with my local library. I love the library. I love the whole concept of it. And that way you get it in front of other people who might never have seen it too. So,
yeah.
So awesome. So every week we share stories of how my guests have come to understand themselves in a more loving and empowering way through the lens of human design. How you think and speak about yourself matters. Human design can show you the reframe of not only your own story, but the story you tell yourself about your relationships. If you're ready to start living a better story, I would love to help guide you through the process of fulfilling and embodying who you came here to be. I invite you to follow Real Human Design Stories on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. To work with me directly, you can set up a free discovery call at kathybashanko.com. Thanks so much, Aypril. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Peace out, everybody.